I'm going to talk about a thing tonight that we did last year, I think, late last year. A thing called a cube. You've all heard of a cube, I suspect. It's a rather important shape in metaphysical things. It has 6 sides and a centre, which give it 7 major divisions. In a document called the Sefer Yetzirah, which first became prominent, I think, about 1000 AD, maybe, it puts creation and the creative process into a cube. And it's not the only major piece of spiritual writing that suggests the cube as being something very creative and important. In Genesis there's 6 days of creation, and there's a 7th day where he rested. This is also a cube. And the thing with that I find anyway a bit daunting in giving out this kind of information is, one, it is really simple, and a danger is that its simplicity and its ease of access can create an environment where a great secret and a great tool can be overlooked because it came so easily. This little guy over here, if you don't know, is a Kabbalistic tree of life. And it's like a computer where everything that exists on any level has its place on one of those circles or one of the paths. The actual cube that I'm talking about is here. This is actually 4-dimensional, and this square part here is the cube. The central point, the sun, relates to your self, your true self, your Buddha self, your Christ self, or whatever kind of deity you want to relate to that. In nature, in the cosmos, it relates to the sun with the rest of the solar system rotating around it. For us, there's ourself and the many events of life that rotate around us. Does that make sense? Like our relationships, work, the many major corridors of life that we participate in. So this cube is a very powerful place if you can create it with the right sort of mindset. There are many different programs that have been going around, some new, some old, of kind of like a mind dynamic where you use visualization and so forth to create your goals or your perfect car or whatever. And all of these things are founded upon, whether known or not, the great legacy of the Hermetic tradition. There's an aspect of us that's extremely powerful. And we don't really give it a lot of credit. You know, if you've decided to give up smoking or some such thing, and that there's a part of you that actually really decides, it's that. Cold turkey, it's over. If you haven't really decided, it's very hard to actually overcome that. And if you look at your life, events in your life where you've actually made change, there's a part of yourself that has been brought forth in the decision-making process, and it just goes, this will be, this is how it is, I've decided. And that's that. There's no going back, there's no changing. Something has been brought into motion, and change actually takes place. Whereas other times when we make a half-hearted decision, the same dynamic is not present. You know what I'm saying? And if we could access this dynamic, if we understood what this dynamic was, then the potential of us making greater change, changing things in our lives, becomes quite a strong possibility. Another very closely aligned part of the Hermetic art is a thing called alchemy, where legend has it that base metals are transmuted to gold, or basically the process of change. And alchemy is the most misunderstood art, when in reality the foundation of it is quite simple. It's founded on the laws of nature. So what I'm suggesting is, if we understand some of the fundamental architecture of nature and consciousness and apply it to this dynamic of will, we can actually make change. But to get to the point of consciousness where that resides, there's a particular pathway or a corridor that we need to, if we know, we can move through that corridor and actually arrive at a place where we can access this most powerful thing, our will. And like I said, we all touch it, and it's so simple. Yet we really don't understand its dynamic, and that's the part of alchemy, because its dynamic is one of the portions in the process of creating like an alchemic medicine. You know, it's a part of the remedy of making things transform. Like I said, it's this part of the tree of life where this cube exists. Here, this thing called the kingdom relates to right here where we are. And we have to somehow go from here to here. And of course, on the way, we have to move through whatever this represents. This is our normal, mundane consciousness. This is another state of consciousness you can relate to as the dreaming, or the astral type of consciousness. And it's a little more dynamic as a state of consciousness than what one would normally use in like guided meditation or visualization. It's got a more dynamic to it. One of the disciplines of the Hermetic art is a thing called conscious dreaming, or becoming conscious in one's dream. And in that state, it's suggested that miraculous things can occur. One can learn, can move through things, and even potentially change events. This here, as you'll see, is called the foundation. And this substance is the foundation upon which this world exists. If we look at it like a map, it's like a plastic substance where matter gathers around to create form and events and so forth. And it's not that hard a point of consciousness to shift in, but like all these things, it's something we do always and don't give it any real credit. You know, don't sort of acknowledge it, oh, this is something wonderful. It's just something that happens all the time, and we just don't give it the energy it deserves, the recognition it deserves. Therefore, we don't make use or explore what we have. There's a meditation technique that I've been giving out for years. It's based on utilising 5 Hebrew letters, 4 of which relate to the 4 elements in nature. The 5th relates to the quintessence. Christ had 5 wounds, and the blood from those 5 wounds was gathered in a grail. And that grail, according to the legend, has miraculous powers of healing and transformation. So the archetypal signature of that statement is that this 5th substance, this quintessence, has some sort of magical power. And it's not only in the legend of the Holy Grail, but it manifests through many of the ancient legends in all cultures. And it's not something that's really all that hidden or even forbidden by some sort of holy law, as a lot of the churches and that would have you believe. And the evidence of that being that it's not an evil thing or a thing that should be shunned away is that if this 5th principle was that, then it wouldn't be represented in nature so obviously. We all have hands, and generally they've got the 5 fingers. And with these hands and 5 fingers, we can create things. It gives us the capacity to not only scratch ourselves, but play musical instruments and do all sorts of wondrous things. And in actual fact, we are 5-pointed when we stand out. And so the signature in nature and in us suggests that it is a very creative principle. Do you understand what I'm saying? But like, I'm going to harp on it a bit, we so overlook this simplicity, that the great power that's really not such a secret becomes a secret because we just don't see it. So back to this point here, which is the normal consciousness, but it's called the kingdom. Now, it's not always the kingdom as such. It's only a kingdom when there's a king that rules the kingdom. And if there's no ruler, then it's certainly not a kingdom, it's chaos, it's a mess. So if in our life, or life's experience, like even right now, if that part of ourselves that makes decisions and rules our unruliness is not present, then there's no king, and there's certainly no kingdom. So for there to be a kingdom, it's important for there to be a king or a queen. So even before we start, there must be a part of us that has the intent and the mastery over all that feelings and thoughts and all the rest of the crap that goes on, that has mastery over that and can say, stop, and it will stop. Now, we've all experienced that sometime. So the intent of that being must also be present here. Does that make sense? When we do the meditation practice, which if is done correctly, releases, invokes really, a degree of energy that potentially, if it's invoked correctly, will shift our consciousness. It's an obvious experience. When it happens, your consciousness shifts. When that dynamic is brought into being, your point of attention or normal consciousness that's here, that keeps you focused here, shifts. And it shifts up this path. That little path there? That little path is the tarot card, the world. And one of its totems is a cross. When a cross is drawn correctly, or I don't know how it should be drawn, it doesn't so much apply 4 things as it represents the 5th, because where it crosses creates the 5th. And what it means is the 4 elements are in harmony. Therefore the spirit rules. Does that make sense? Now each of us has an elemental nature. You know, we have a fiery nature where we get fiery, inspired, angry. If we're watery, we're moody. If we're airy, we're thinking and arguing with our thoughts. And if we're overly earth-like, we're melancholic and depressed. And we often believe that, I am angry, I am moody. Well, that's imprisoning the spirit into the element. When the I am is released from that, then all those little elemental aspects of our being must obey. What this meditation practice does is it uses the 4 letters of a sacred name, Yod-He Vor-He, which in this ancient tradition, when said with correct intent, bring the elements into harmony. And we vibrate those in their correct place on the body. And that has the potential, if done with intent, to put us here now. And then what we do is we utilise the 5th letter to open up 3 major chakras: the crown, the heart and the base. And then by the correct intent of the letters, it actually invokes an energy, and an energy becomes present. And we circulate this energy with the breath through a figure 8, through our being. Now all this has an enormous amount of significance if we were going to sit down and go through the numerical keys of all this, but it takes weeks. But it has the potential of shifting consciousness. Now, as I said, when it starts to shift consciousness, we move up into here. Once our consciousness or point of attention is shifted into this more energetic state where the rest sits on, then we're at the point where we can actually create the environment for us to move into this cube.
Is that when you talk about that just before you lose that consciousness?
What sort of happens with the meditation, you can, when it gets going, you can sort of get to a point where you're nod off. And then you can bring in another aspect of the deep part of the meditation to keep yourself going deeper and deeper. that's sort of rarefying and rarefying your consciousness so that you're actually going deeper and deeper into your being, but still maintaining a degree of awareness. What we're actually doing here is getting to that first level where the energy shifts and the consciousness is no longer concretized with this. It's not unaware of here, but it's not concretized, it's released.
It's not entertaining story.
Yeah, it's out of there. It's out of there. The cube having four sides, each one of the four sides relates to one of the elements in nature. So if we don't have a rapport with nature and those elements, you know, if there's no connection in us between nature, we're bloody connected to a lot of things. But if we don't have that rapport, then it's very hard to have like a love. When you think of water, you know, you call water and sea water, it's, you know, just for right now, visualise a still pond. And if you visualise a still pond, it has a particular effect upon you. Generally, it's stilling. And if you visualise a candle, it can become stilling, or a warm fire. And visualise a nice meadow with the birds singing, and the earth becomes alive. And the air, if you know you don't have breathing difficulties, and it's not in a city and you can breathe, oh yeah, that feels good. And that sort of exercise is very important. There's far greater ramifications than what we can deal with tonight. But what we do is, once that consciousness is moved a bit, then it's simply we create four walls out of the elements in our mind. It has an above and a below. And the above and the below have great significance. There's a thing called the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. Any of you guys, you heard the Emerald Tablet? It's one of the most famous archaeological finds to come out of the Valley of Hebron. And this tablet is accredited to demigod of Egypt called Thrice Great Hermes. Thrice Great Hermes has a specific relationship to the three wise men they're trying to work out that came to visit the Christ child. Thrice great and three being part of that key. This tablet, which is really just a paragraph, contains all, basically, as above, so below. True without error, certain and most true. The father is the sun, the mother it is the moon. The wind carried it in its belly, and the nurse thereof is the earth. These are the four elements. Then it goes on about separating the gross from the fine, and how once you separate this substance, it can basically penetrate anything. It's the source of all miraculous activity. And then it ends with, therefore I am thrice great Hermes, having three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That which I have written is consummated concerning the operations of the sun. So, above and below, Jesus represented it in the term of on earth as it is in heaven, above and below. Now I'm sure everyone here at some time in your life have experienced the phenomena that Jung called synchronicity. And that is, sometimes you're sort of thinking of something and then it, in a way, it appears in daily life. You know how that happens? There's some action and then the reaction is right there, and it's just so synchronized, it's magical. It often happens when you fall in love, you know, there's this synchronicity that occurs. Or if someone's trying to get a message to you and you're aware there's some sort of synchronicity and you go, aha! And Jung used this synchronicity a lot in his therapy of psychology. When a synchronicity like that occurs, the above, or the outer world, and the inner world are in sync. And that's a great thing. in hermetic operation, like magical rituals, part of some of those rituals is to align the above with the below, or align what one wants to produce out there with where one is right now. And when the above and the below are together, like a synchronicity, there's this incredible magical power. So, like I said, this cube has got the four sides of the elements. It has an above and a below. The above has a particular emblem, and so does the below. The above has the emblem of a lion, and the below a lamb. The roof is a lion, the floor is a lamb. So when the lion and the lamb lay together, there is peace on earth. Now, if we're somehow going to get the above and the below to align, we must be in a state of peace, calmness. And if we're immersed in the elements, there's no way we're calm, we're possessed by them. So we're extracting our consciousness from the elements. The lamb was here. And Jesus, who was supposedly the lamb, said the meek shall inherit the earth and all that sort of stuff. So if somehow we can put ourselves in a place where we can touch this, then we must be very careful that the ego doesn't get all pumped up and try and be all powerful, all aggressive and rule the world, so to speak. The Lamb tells us that. We must be meek and humble and virtually invisible. Because what actually comes through is the power of the lion. And when the two come together, there is peace, there's this synchronicity. Now if we look at the lion in the text, that it's something that can overpower us and devour us, where the lamb can't. Now if you consider our relationship with the world, it has a tendency to overpower us and devour us. Whereas us little innocent children are like lambs, and it can get us. So there's that relationship as well, that we have to somehow create a relationship between that force and this force. So when we hit this synchronicity, the lion or the outer world and the inner lamb are at peace. And I suggest we could possibly walk through situations we normally wouldn't even dare to.
So it's holding space.
Yeah. And what I've said has quite deep ramifications, and one can contemplate it for a long time. I certainly have. But what I'm suggesting is that with this simple practice, you can access this incredible state of being that is our inheritance. We've all got it. To touch it is one thing. To grow and develop it in it is another. And that's something that takes a lifetime, or lifetimes. It's something that only exists while we're conscious of it. So if you were to take the small amount of what I've said and contemplate and research it for a long time, you would find it would unfold and unfold and unfold to take in every philosophical basis of enlightenment on any culture, of Buddhism, whatever. Its foundations are all within this structure. But it's certainly be on tonight to expand upon that. So what I'd like to do is to give you simply the process, the simple practice of going to a place where you can cultivate this dynamic. And the processes within, at least of what I say, the processes within the archetypal structure that makes it legitimate in law, hermetic law, occult law, natural law, divine law, Kabbalistic law. But I don't know about man's law. If you study these laws, you'd find that the very foundation of creation is structured on them. They're a wonderful thing. And in that cube is where if one makes a strong decision, I'm going to change or I'm going to do X, that decision is energized, it's empowered. It's not just a whim. And right now, if you have some awareness, you know there's an atmosphere here, an energy. And what's sort of going on is the inner state is also the outer state. The above and the below are, right now are one and the same thing. Baba, Lion. So you'll see that this state is like being in a holy place. And it's suggesting that our capacity to choose, our will that chooses, is a holy and sacred thing. And it should be respected. There's another way of developing this state, this capacity to be willful and have it act. And it works hand in hand with this occult process. And if you can perform this process and you don't do the other practice, it'll undermine and destroy what we're doing here. And if you do the process that I'm talking about and you perfect it, then you will achieve the same end result. And that is a really simple practice. Honour your decisions. If you decide to do something, do it. If you're not prepared to do it, don't waste the time of your will in contemplating maybe. Do it. If you're going to get up and have a drink, don't think about it. Do it. And honour that. And you'll find that in the process of honouring that, your mind will start to obey, and all that other crap that gets in the way and undermines our capacity starts to obey, because it's going to know that when you go, this is what I'm going to do, you're going to do it. So it's not going to play so many games. It'll try for a while to lead you astray and trick you and make you doubt yourself. That's just the nature of it. But if you honour your decisions and you follow through with them, you develop the same thing.